We just finished the first Football Guys mock draft of the 2026 fantasy football season and almost immediately realized that there's a lot wrong with the way people are drafting this year. Looking at ADP, we saw some massive deficiencies while we were doing this draft. And today, Joey Wright and I are going to go through our teams as well as the other 10 teams drafted by our Football Guys staffers, trying to find value pockets, strategies, and data that you can use going into 2026. So, Joey, first question for you. If we redrafted 30 days from today, what do you think would change the most in this mock draft?
If you're looking at our draft board, the QB value, it was absolutely insane. We had Josh Allen going with the 11th pick of round 4. Drake May, who's my QB2 this year, going at the 4th pick of round 6. Jaden Daniels in the 8th round, and then Jackson Dart at the 9-10. These running back or these quarterback values are going to be unheard of come August. I think what we're going to see happen is managers get a little more comfortable of who's going in round 6, round 7, even round 4, and you're going to see these quarterback values move up considerably. I Please give me this value in August, but I know it's not going to stay.
Now, you say that, and I think that you might be right, but also, like, I feel like we're in this world right now in fantasy football where there are just so many viable late round quarterbacks that feel like everybody was kind of playing chicken. Like, nobody wanted to be the first person to take a quarterback because, yeah, sure, it's great to have Josh Allen, but realistically, you could end up getting similar production from Drake May, Jackson Dart, Jaden Daniels, maybe late season Patrick Mahomes, maybe Caleb Williams takes a step forward, Justin Herbert. Like, there's so much good value out there. So I think this is partially a testament to playing with a lot of people who are too smart for their own good, a bunch of football guys,
Mhm.
analysts that all know the late round value to be had. But also, like, when I'm looking at rankings, like, I could look at my QB 24 is Daniel Jones, QB 25 is Cam Ward, QB 26 Fernando Mendoza, QB 27 Bryce Young. Those are all guys realistically that, like, if variance just moves slightly in their direction, could give you top 5 production this year.
Dave, you're preaching to the choir here. You mean you know me? I am the guy that
Yeah.
just takes quarterback last in every league. Look at last year, QB 20 and QB 24, Matthew Stafford and Trevor Lawrence in ADP, and look where they finished as QB 3 and QB 4.
Right.
So it happens every year, and it's never going to stop happening. Waiting on quarterback is never a bad strategy.
And I feel like it's even better now than it has been
Yeah.
in years past. So to kind of put an actionable spin on this opening question that we had, what will change 30 days from now? I think you're right that, like, as we get closer to the season, we'll see QB value move up. But if and when that happens, when QBs start moving up the board, that just tells me there's going to be better value on running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and you just still want to continue waiting for your quarterback. If you're watching on YouTube, say this every single episode, but please, we see a lot of people watching the show are not subscribed to the channel. So please subscribe, leave a comment. That's a great way to help the show grow as well. We reply to every single comment that we get here on YouTube. And of course, give us a thumbs up, a like. That helps this grow as well. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, again, I say this every single episode, but please leave us a review. One, we really like the feedback. Let us know what we're doing well, where we can improve. And two, it also helps the show grow, which is at the end of the day, the number one goal here is to get this show out to as many people as possible. But Joey, let's go ahead back into the mock draft now, and we're going to kind of break this up section by section, looking at the early rounds, middle rounds, and then the late rounds. And starting with these middle rounds here, we saw 5 drafters double tap running backs to start, and 2 even tripled up using their first 3 picks exclusively on running backs. So, what are your thoughts on this robust running back strategy? We saw it kind of falling out of popularity over the last few years, and it certainly seems like it's back now.
It's not a strategy I normally like to go with unless there's tremendous value. I think it's just leaning too hard in one direction. And for me, a direction that isn't as stable.
Yeah.
And it also feels really dependent on those drafters hitting those late round wide receiver dart throws, which last year we had 8 wide receivers, finishes top 24 wide receivers that were drafted as the wide receiver 30 or later. So these
Mm.
dart throws, they happen, they hit. You just need to be good at making sure you do land them. But I think the reason that it's gaining on popularity is we're seeing teams really move away from having a bell cow back and more towards timeshares. I think there's maybe 16 running backs taken in this draft that I think you would say have the bell cow to lead back upside for their teams. And the rest of the 16 other backfields, I mean, at best a 60-40 timeshare. So these 16 running backs that pretty much went off the board uh, in order, I think what you'll see from them is okay, these guys have their roles on their team solidified. Let me get two of those guys because after that, it's really unsure.
Yeah, and I think that's a very sharp take to like there is a tier fall off. And for me, I see a few guys that maybe could have been mixed in a little bit higher, but like after I see Javante Williams go off the board at 312, we did see a little bit of a break then in drafting running backs. And that's because everybody after that, we got Travis Etienne, who, yeah, he's got the contract, but they talked about splitting touches with Alvin Kamara this year. We see Travion Henderson, who we just talked about, Ramadre Stevenson. He's not going anywhere in New England. RJ Harvey splitting touches with J.K. Dobbins, David Montgomery. I think that's one of the sharper, better value picks here by our Bob Harris, who sniped me on that one. But I do feel like once you get past Javante Williams, then you're looking at all of these guys in split backfields. Similarly, the NFL has changed. We're seeing the ball get spread around a lot more. We're seeing fewer three wide receiver formations. We're seeing a lot more tight ends on the field. So where it used to be that I think you could kind of seek these wide receiver twos, wide receiver threes on their team that could still be viable in fantasy, those are becoming much rarer. You're not really seeing a floor with any of those late round receivers. So I think it does kind of push people into wanting to just like get their studs early, kind of lock in those positions. And you saw there were a handful of teams that kind of did the running back, wide receiver, maybe mix in a tight end. But it did seem like a lot of people went into the draft saying, I want my running backs early, or I want my wide receivers early. And I wonder if that's going to see or be how we see people starting to draft now going forward, because it doesn't seem like that production is spread evenly among the positions anymore. So we only saw two teams start wide receiver, wide receiver. And Joey, it felt like, if we were drafting 3 years ago, so many people wanted to just start wide receivers early, like
Mhm.
lock in those alpha wide receivers. But gone are the days of Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones and, these guys that are just like breaking fantasy football. So do you think that this early round wide receiver heavy approach is no longer viable?
I think it's still viable. You just need to get good value. I think it's probably just as risky as robust RB. I want to look at Drew and Bob's teams because I think that's a really good example of
Yes.
going wide receiver, wide receiver. And
In
I
Drew's
won't
case, he
argue
went
that
wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. He went three straight there.
exactly. Drew taking CeeDee Lamb and Drake London, like you can't really argue those are probably the two best players at that time to come off the board.
Yep.
And Bob, even better with Chase and Neighbors. Um, I, I like that as a start, and then you can build from that. I do look at Drew's team and I wonder though, where he took Rasheed Rice, which I think is a great pick if Rasheed Rice is going to be on the field. If he was hoping that, or sorry, with Drake London, I should say, if he was hoping Chase Brown or Marion Hampton, Devon A.
Yeah.
Chain would have fallen to him, because I think had that have happened, Drew would have had slam dunk my favorite team in this draft.
And I think Drake London is a great pick there, but you do wonder a little bit. Yeah, James Cook, Ken Walker, Devon Achane, Amari Hampton, Chase Brown, all going off the board, five straight running backs before his pick. You don't really want to pay up for a running back after that sort of run, but I think that's at a tremendous value on Drake London. Like that is going later than his ADP from last year, where we saw when he
Mhm.
was healthy, he was just like a lock for 100 yards and a touchdown almost every single week. So Drake London, we'll talk about that one a little bit later, but definitely one of my favorite picks in the draft there. Now, we've talked about the running backs and the wide receivers going in the early round. Something that shocked me a little bit, Joey, is that we only saw two tight ends drafted in the first three rounds. So now, after the dust has settled, looking at how the board ultimately shook out, how do you feel about those values on Trey McBride and Brock Bowers? Do you think that they went where they should have?
So once we hit the 206, I was just kind of waiting for them to come off the board because I'm like,
Hmm.
man, the value on them right now is really good. And Jake Bryant, who was drafted out of the 5 spot, he got Trey McBride first, and then Brock Bowers went right after him at the 303. And I think Dave, if I had to get the better value, give me the guy that goes second, because I've
Right.
got him 1, 2 in my rankings, and you got him what, 8 picks after McBride. So the value there's a little bit better for you. But what I like is that you guys were both able to get really solid wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3s in the next few rounds. Jake got George Pickens and Emeka Ibuka, and then you were able to get Zay Flowers and DJ Moore. And these were as your wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3,
Hmm.
not wide receiver 1s. You got wide receiver 1 talent at the wide receiver 2 and 3 position. I love that you were able to pair that with your tight ends. And that's when you're drafting early with tight ends. If you can pull that off, it makes the value even better.
So the last thing I'll say about these early rounds, or I shouldn't say, the last thing I'll ask about these early rounds is that we saw in round three, the running backs dried up a little bit. It seemed like round one, round two, everyone was really going after the running backs. Round three is when we saw this shift. Over half of the picks in round three were wide receivers. And we kind of talked about it. Like after Javante Williams, it feels like things dried up a little bit. Do you think everybody kind of shifting to wide receivers in round three is people just saying, like, the dead zone is here and I want to try to avoid that?
Yeah, after Brees Hall and Javante Williams, I think there is a tier fall off for me. Like where everybody that was taken after that, you start seeing question marks with Travis Etienne or Achan. Sorry, that's going to be really tough to get through this season. Travis Achan, uh, you know, okay, it's his first year in New Orleans. How's he going to do? Probably good. But Travion Henderson, he's in a timeshare to a degree. RJ Harvey, was J.K. Dobbins actually should he be the lead back in Denver? Lots of questions with these. David Montgomery, I'll get into David Montgomery in a little bit, but
I think
questions
that's one
once
the
we get
market
past.
just hasn't picked up on yet. I think David Montgomery should be probably in that Javante tier. I was kind of surprised to see him slip the way he did, but that's just, I think ADP hasn't caught up yet. So he was kind of buried in sleeper ADP. But in my opinion, I mean, we've seen these veterans just come to Houston and immediately return RB1 value. So I'm excited about Montgomery there.
I'm a little worried with Montgomery with the workload coming into his 8th year. Woody
Mhm.
Marks, they kind of had similar numbers last year. I do think Montgomery's going to be get the first touches there, but I, I'll be shocked if he gets like, if they're just like, okay, now this backfield's yours, Dave Montgomery.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if that happens.
So let's keep this conversation going because I want to continue talking about the running back dead zone, but let's kind of transition now into the middle rounds when we're looking at rounds 4 through 6. I looked at all of the picks here and there was a heavy preference towards wide receivers. We got 18 wide receivers, 10 running backs, 4 tight ends, 4 quarterbacks. Again, Joey, is this what you kind of see these rounds 4 through 6 as the dead zone and people trying to avoid it? Because when I look at a lot of these running backs in this range, every single one of them has giant question marks.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like question marks all over the board. If you look through 4 through 6, even Cam Scottaboo, who I got at the third pick in round 6, he's coming off an injury. We don't know how quick he's going to come back on the field.
Right.
That's somebody that probably, had he not been injured, played a full season, we'd have a little bit higher. So that's a question mark for him. Uh, DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson, like, yeah, just a lot of question marks there. But we kind of talked about the Dave Montgomery thing, and like that's the one that kind of sticks out with me where I feel like that might be the most dead zone pick of all. I kind of love that you
Ooh.
disagree with me on that and you think he should be higher.
Yeah, and a lot of it just comes down to, like, what I saw from Joe Mixon in this offense just 2 years ago before he had that foot injury. I see a very similar play style between David Montgomery and Joe Mixon, somebody who is just, like, aggressive at breaking tackles, hits the hole hard, and the offensive line isn't great, but so much what David Montgomery does, this guy played behind a terrible offensive line his entire tenure in Chicago, so he knows how to make lemonade out of lemons. So it's just we've seen that this offense wants to lean on a bell cow when they have it, and I don't think they had that guy last year, which is why we saw a mix of Nick Chubb and Woody Marks and Dare Ogunbowale. But I think them going out and trading for David Montgomery speaks a lot to the plans that they have for him. But I think one of my biggest takeaways as we were doing this, we're doing this pre NFL draft, and I
Yeah.
wish I'd put a little bit more thought into this before we started drafting because I did my typical, I want to get my wide receivers, I want to get an elite tight end, and of course I've got that anchor with Jameer Gibbs. But as I start taking these middle round running backs, that's when I realized all of these guys that are on the board right now are just like the guys who we expect to get nuked in the NFL draft. It's so easily every single guy here. Like I feel good about Bashaw Tootin, as good as you can, but
Mhm.
I also really like Chris Rodriguez, and I could see Chris Rodriguez potentially being the lead guy here, making it very tough for Tootin to score points. Jalen Warren, I like him. I've talked about how I like him more than Rico Dowdle for the pass blocking and the efficiency metrics. But if Pittsburgh went out and drafted a running back, wouldn't surprise me one bit. Brian Robinson, that is just a hope and a prayer when you're taking Brian Robinson that they don't bring in anybody else. And then, of course, Bijan Robinson, you'd want him to miss some time so Brian Robinson could pay off. But all of these guys, Chuba Hubbard, Tyler Algier, Blake Corum, J.K. Dobbins, all feel like guys who could get potentially replaced in the draft. But what we did see also in these rounds, Joey, quarterbacks and tight ends finally started getting drafted a little bit. We saw Loveland, Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Tyler Warren, Tucker Kraft, Fannin, and Drake May. So looking at all of those four running back or four tight ends, four quarterbacks, which was your favorite value and which was your least favorite value?
My favorite value is easy. Is my QB2 is Drake May. At
Yeah.
604, that's insane, folks. Like, even if he was the second quarterback taken, it would have still been the 506 where Lamar Jackson went. And I'd have been great with Drake May there. And this, I am the guy that likes to wait on quarterback or just get it at good value. I think that value on Drake May is incredible. He went, let's see, my least favorite though. And this is kind of where I'm nitpicking, and it's not the players, it's what happened. And Phil's team, where he took Loveland and Burrow back to back. Now, I almost took Colson Loveland with my fourth round pick. What I'm not crazy about, and this is where I'm nitpicking, is he went early on tight end and quarterback both. Because what it did to his team is his wide receiver two is Chris Godwin, Parker Washington, or Jalen Coker. Like, he's kind of just hoping one of those guys hits. It's just a little risky for me with that strategy. But I like the value on Burrow as well. So it's not even a value situation with these two. It's just taking those two positions back to back so early. He does have two elite players at the position, but I think his wide receivers suffer because of it.
Yeah, and especially in a league where, the settings that we had here were 3 wide receivers and 2 flex and half PPR. That's why I took more of a wide receiver heavy approach here, but, Loveland and Burrow, I think, like, they're both good values, but I do think that, like, if you're paying up for both a quarterback and a tight end, it does kind of paint you into a corner a little bit. Burrow
Mm-hmm.
was my least favorite value pick here just because the lack of the rushing upside. Like, you really need the passing variance for him to play out. And I feel like, you can get a guy like Matthew Stafford 10 rounds later, and you're kind of making the same bet there that you are with Burrow. But I think my favorite value here, funny enough, was Colston Loveland. Him
Yep.
going almost a full round after Brock Bowers. And we've talked about it, like Colston Loveland, what he did his rookie season over the second half of the year, led the league in yards per route run, was the tight end two in scoring over the second half of the season as well. And now with DJ Moore out of the picture, there are big plans for Colson Loveland. So that's a guy that I am trying to get. Like, I don't like paying up for McBride in round two, but Browers in round three, Loveland in round four, those are the values that I really like in drafts this year. We also saw something interesting here. Rookies finally started to get
Mm-hmm.
drafted a little bit, and we saw a run of rookies here. Funny enough, with Mike Kashuba and Jeff Bell, the guys who helped me out on the Football Guys rookie guide, footballguys.com/rookie guide. Be sure to download that if you have not already. But they just went on a straight run here around the turn. We saw Carnell Tate go at 5'11, Jordan Tyson at 5'12, and then Makai Lemon at 6'01. So, Joey, do you think that we got that order correct? Because the rookie guide, the rankings, personal preferences, I mean, it's so tough, but I think seeing those guys clustered together on a draft board makes sense.
Yeah, shout out to me who had to sit there and listen to these two guys talk about rookies the whole draft, the two
Yeah.
dynasty guys, football guys. No, I do think they went in the right order, and I'm not concerned that Tyson went before Lemon, because Jeff had that 5-6 turn, and I do this
Right. Yeah.
thing where I've
Yeah.
got the pick on the turn, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna take the better player second, so I can say, oh, well, I got Makai Lemon in the sixth
In
round.
the sixth
It's
round.
just
Right. Yeah.
it's just fun little bragging rights that you can do there in a draft, especially when you're drafting like with Mike and Jeff, and they're in each other's heads with dynasty stuff all the time. So I think that's why Jeff took Lemon second ahead of behind Tyson. But yeah, I think they got him in the right order. But 3 weeks from now, we got the NFL draft, and it could be flipped on its head completely with landing spots. So bring this question back to me in 3 weeks. We'll see where we're at. But for now, I think they do got it in the right order.
We're back with Joey Wright, and we have talked about the early and middle rounds of this mock draft. And now we're going to dig into some of the late round picks, overall takeaways, and then discussing our individual teams just a little bit. Joey, so much of these late rounds, and this was just kind of how we set up the mock draft, right? Like, only 10 rounds. I made a fatal mistake here, and I will just address it. I didn't think about the fact that everybody would be picking to fill out their roster. So when I was on the clock in round 9, I took Quentin Johnson, and I was looking, I said, well, I'll get one of Justin Herbert, Jackson Dart, Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott. One of those four will make it back around to me. But as everybody else was filling out their roster, they didn't make it back around to me, and I was forced to go with Brock Purdy. Had this been a deeper draft, 15 rounds, we probably would have seen some of those quarterbacks come back around, but just a mistake on my part. We did see a lot of these picks were just people filling in their quarterback and tight end spots. So we can kind of gloss over that, but the running back and wide receiver picks, which one made you raise your eyebrows the most? This could be good or bad.
Jason Wood, congratulations. Romeo Dobbs at the 901. 45th wide receiver off the board. That's just insane value.
Yeah.
He's our consensus at Football Guys, wide receiver 33. And this is just ADP not catching up on sleeper and Jason just being a sharp drafter. And this is a tip to everyone out there drafting, like be a sharp drafter, know where players are normally going, where they should be going. And get your guys too. He's a wide receiver one now for the Patriots. Should see an uptick in usage in 2026. I think in closer to August, this pick is made 2, 3 rounds earlier.
I think you're very much so right, and I do wonder how much of that suppression in cost is just the fear that they bring back Stephon Diggs or that they trade for AJ Brown, as we've kind of heard the rumblings so far. So I think that was a good value pick. The one that shocked me, Joey, and like I was the guy saying not to draft Brian Thomas Jr. last year at his cost, but my goodness, when I was sitting there in round 8, getting ready to make my pick, and Brian Thomas Jr. was still on the board, he got sniped 2 picks before me. But that to me, do you feel like we may have overcorrected a little bit? I mean, he was kind of in the wrong situation early in the year, and then he dealt with injuries later in the year. But this is a guy who came off of a very good rookie season, a first round pick. I know there's concerns about Jacoby Myers being there and how Travis Hunter is going to get involved, but two things jumped out to me. One, Parker Washington was drafted before him, and two, he fell to the second half of round 8. I can't help
Yep.
but feel like maybe we overcorrected on Brian Thomas Jr. just a bit.
You know, I'm gonna be one of the guilty ones here. Like we probably did overcorrect, but I took Jacoby Myers when I could have taken Brian Thomas Jr. So I made that decision. I was on the clock. And it's funny, all three of those Jaguars wide receivers went within a round of each other.
Right.
Jacoby Myers went to 710, Parker Washington to 806, and Brian Thomas Jr. to 808. Like we probably have overcorrected, but one person in the of the three of us is going to get great value, and the other one's is going to kind of be left, sitting in the corner on this with the value. Because I think the ball is going to be spread around, but for Trevor Lawrence not to start leaning on a wide receiver at this point would surprise me.
And I think that's the perfect takeaway here is that the uncertainty leads to ambiguity in drafts where everybody just kind of gets pushed down. The reality is, of these three guys, Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, and Brian Thomas Jr., who are all drafted very similar to each other, one of these guys is probably going to return value where it's like, wow, that should have been a third round pick. And another one or two of these guys is probably going to be worthless. And then there's probably going to be that boomer bust guy somewhere in there. But I think the uncertainty has opened up a huge value opportunity here. And I don't know who that guy is, but
Yeah.
I'm probably, I have Jacoby Myers ranked highest of the bunch, but considering that he's going first of the bunch as well, like I do see some value here with Brian Thomas Jr. One other guy I want to mention, Joey, is Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, we are
Yeah.
very quickly just throwing in the towel on talented prospects when we don't see what we want from them immediately. I know it seems like the very same story, right? Like a new offense, midseason injuries for Marvin Harrison Jr. And now we're just punishing him. A guy who was a second or third round pick last year is now falling all the way into the middle of round 7. Like I understand the fears with both of these guys, Brian Thomas Jr. and Marvin Harrison Jr., but you also have to see the upside.
Oh, completely. And the Marvin Harrison Jr., when he was on the field last year, he was very competent. So the fact that he went in the seventh
Yeah,
round, that is tremendous value. I want to kind of speak to why I took Myers before, and I know we're going to talk about our teams later,
yeah,
but
yeah.
we're on the Myers, the Jacksonville wide receivers. I really like my 3 wide receivers that I took before then, so I went the safe route. I feel like Jacoby Myers is the
Smart.
safest wide receiver you can take for the Jaguars. Had I not liked my wide receiver 3 or my wide receiver 2 or not been in on them, I probably would have gone Brian Thomas Jr. to have more upside. But I wanted the safe guy as my wide receiver 4 at that point.
I like that. Now let's talk about just some overall takeaways here. What is the biggest disadvantage to drafting a fantasy football team before the NFL draft, and how did that kind of impact your strategy, Joey?
I mean, there's the obvious, like where the rookie's going to land
Yeah,
disadvantage. Like we saw these 3 wide receivers go with Mike and Jeff there with Carnell Tate and Makai Lemon, and the landing spots are going to determine what's the better value there. But I think
right.
the biggest disadvantage with this lies in the drafted players who roles aren't solidified and the rookies that come in after them. You look at somebody like, Chuba Hubbard. If the Panthers, and we've heard that Jonathan Brooks is coming back, but if the Panthers say, you know
Mhm.
what, we just want to make sure we're set at running back, and they draft a running back or Rashad White in Washington, like there's a lot of question marks out there. And I think you see those players either fall down the board or they'll start to rise up after the draft. I'll use one of the players I drafted as an example,
Chase
Devontae
Brown?
Adams. Like,
Oh.
which say?
I thought
Who'd
you
you
were gonna
say?
say Chase Brown because we were talking about Chase Brown on
No,
the show last week, and we were talking about, like, what happens if they draft Jeremiah Love, and, like, right
yeah,
now, I think if the depth chart stands as is, like, that's a great value on Chase Brown, but, like, this could be one of those that we're looking at after the NFL draft, Jeremiah Love in Cincinnati, and we're saying, "What was Joey thinking with Chase Brown in the top of round 2?"
100%. Another one, Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
If the Rams decide we're going to take one of these high wide receivers, boy, I hope they trade Adams because 3 mouths to feed in that Rams offense. We've seen them do really well with 2, and then they got all those tight ends. That Devontae Adams pick would start looking really, really bad.
So I've got 2 questions now for you. We're gonna do favorite and least favorite teams, Joey. What is your favorite team? Of all of these, all dozen teams that were drafted, which one do you look at the draft board and say, "That's nice. I wish
I
I had drafted that team."
I was really, really torn between Mung and Drew Davenport, and I think it really does lie in that, if Drew Davenport would have gotten Amarian Hampton, Devon Achan, or Chase Brown instead of Drake London, and then filled his team out from there, I think he would have my favorite team. But it's Mung. Getting Ashton Genty in the first round, and
Yeah.
then a nice little trio of wide receivers: Justin Jefferson, Lad McConkey, Roma Dunze. And listen, Mung is very determined and dependent on the Chargers offense just taking another step next year. We think Keenan Allen's going to be moving on. He's got a lot of Chargers. He's got Gadsden, Justin Herbert, and he's got Lad McConkey, who I do think is going to kind of return to form from what we saw in 2024. Mung's team, and he's got Blake Corum too. Just a lot of really good pieces there. I like Mung's team a lot.
So, a little fun fact, Mung was one of the first guys I ever podcasted with. Like, when I started getting into this, I'd been doing some writing. Mung invited me on his podcast years ago, and we just always seem to align on player takes. Like, there's a lot of people that you'll agree with, like, a lot, and then you'll still find those disagreements. Like, over the 6 years that Mung and I have been friends and making content together, we very rarely find disagreements. So, I'm with you as well. I love the team that he drafted here, and there's certainly some risk, but Mung knows that risk is what wins championships. And that's why Justin Jefferson in round 2, my goodness, that could end up looking absolutely insane. I don't know if you saw the quote yesterday where Kevin O'Connell kind of named Kyler Murray the starter, said, like, we're going to want Kyler Murray just getting the ball to Justin Jefferson when he's got one-on-one coverage. So that could end up being a huge payoff there where you're getting a top 3 receiver in the middle of round 2. Lad McConkey could take that step forward. And of course, I drafted Quentin Johnston very late in this draft, but I think McConkey is the bet you want to make in this wide receiver room. I just talked about Blake Corum being one of my favorite picks in drafts, and that's who I was really, really hoping for to come back to me before I had to take Brian Robinson. But I think he drafted a very, very good team as well. I'd have been happy to walk away with that one. Now, for the not so fun question, Joey, which
Yeah.
team do you look at and say, maybe things didn't go their way?
Listen, I think all the teams are pretty well balanced. I don't think anybody had a bad draft. I'm just going to say the team that I would not want to manage. Or I shouldn't say I would have the hardest time
Mhm.
managing. And this is not because Adam Hutchinson is my co-host on Sunday Morning Live in season and stole a Mika Ibuka from me last year in an industry draft. Has nothing to do with that. I think he got great value on Josh Allen. Um, his receivers are just kind of a glob of wide receiver threes for me, and I'm just worried about that. I think skipping over Pollard and maybe taking Marvin Harrison Jr. there or DK Metcalf would have
Mhm.
really improved his team a lot. He's got 3 really great running backs. And I want to kind of shout out his Jonathan Taylor at the 102 spot. When you are in a draft, if you're a fan of a team and you've got a high caliber, an elite player, he took Jonathan Taylor and he's a Colts fan. And I endorse that pick because fantasy, you need to have fun. And he could win with Jonathan Taylor. Who's to say he's not the RB2 this season or the RB1 even? So I
Yeah.
don't hate the Taylor pick. When
And
it
we saw
happened, a lot of
Jonathan
people were
Jonathan
like,
Taylor
"Oh,
was the RB1 before Daniel Jones got hurt, and if Daniel Jones is back at the start of week 1, it's not I wouldn't do it, and I'm not ranking it that way, but, yeah, I
mm,
think that there is something to be said for just, like, getting your guys. Like, Jonathan Taylor's
get
not
your
making it back to you at 211, so
nope."
if you want him, just take him at 102.
Yeah, I liked that pick from I didn't love it, but so that'd be the team that I would have the hardest time managing, and I'm not in on
And
Fannin like as much as everyone else is. I
yeah.
kind of like where he went though in this draft, so it's not I'm not even hating on the value that much. But
Can I
Jameson
give you the
Williams as your wide
bullish
receiver one, like, ugh,
Can I give you the
good.
bullish case for Harold Fannin? Why
Go
I
ahead.
am in on Harold Fannin? One, I do think that they're kind of in a position where they could end up drafting Chris Brazell or David Boston with their first round pick. But if they don't, we have seen Todd Monken, like he was the offensive coordinator when we saw that massive shift 2 years ago in Baltimore, where they started going into 12 and 13 personnel with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. But that kind of even comes back from his days in Georgia, where he had Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp and was running these heavy jumbo sets with multiple tight ends. So he does seem like the type of coach who wants to make tight ends a featured part of the offense. And we saw that Harold Fanning is far and away the best receiver there. So I do still like Harold Fanning quite a bit. I like that value at 6'11. I think getting him after Tucker Kraft coming off of the ACL is a great value. So yeah, I'm not crazy about Adams' team, but I do like the Fannin pick, and I'll cape up for him a little bit. Now,
There you
Joey,
go.
want to close the show talking about our teams because that's what everybody wants to hear about, right? They just want to hear us talking about our fake
Yeah.
teams that we drafted in a fake draft. Do you want to go first, or
Mhm.
do you want me to?
You go first. I've been going first on everything. I want
All
to
right.
hear you talk for a little
I'll just kind of
bit.
run through pick by pick and explain my thought process on each of
Yeah.
these picks. So the first one, no brainer at 103. I was fully expecting to take Puka Nakua, but when Adam kind of threw that wrench in there going with JT, taking Jameer Gibbs, who I have ranked as my number one player in fantasy, was thrilled to get him. And then after taking Jameer Gibbs, I said, I've kind of got my anchor there. And there weren't any like, had Jeremiah Love fallen to me, had Chase Brown, Amari Hampton, Achan, Ken Walker fallen to me, I probably would have taken them. But with them off the board, I was frothing at the idea of getting Malik Neighbors, but still happy to settle for Nico Collins there as well. Brock Bowers at the 303. That is probably my favorite pick here. Like, I think Brock Bowers should be a middle second round pick. Getting him in the third was thrilled with that. And then, of course, I had to load up on some wide receivers because I didn't get that first round wide receiver. So, Zay Flowers, that's kind of your safer wide receiver one, but, a guy that you can get a consistent floor from. And then DJ Moore, also, not to pat myself on the back too hard, was thrilled with that value pick. And this was one in Sleeper where I had to reach about 40 spots for him in Sleeper ADP. I don't think they've really picked up yet, but this is closer to where I have him ranked. Happy to get DJ Moore there in round 5. This was where I wasn't crazy, and this is where I realized maybe I should have gone a little bit heavier on running backs early. Baishal Tutin, Jalen Warren, Brian Robinson. If there's one position that I'm okay punting on, it is RB2 because I'm confident in my ability to find an RB2, whether it's on waivers or late in the draft. But I realized doing that before the NFL draft is very difficult because we don't know what these running back rooms are going to look like. So I talked about it earlier in the show. Jalen Warren could easily get replaced in the draft. Baishal Tutin, well, I think that he's a good player and there's exciting efficiency and athleticism metrics. Chris Rodriguez there makes it a very ambiguous situation. Not crazy about that bet. And then Brian Robinson, I mean, there's nothing projectable there. Like that is purely a handcuff if Brian or Bijan were to go down. And then my last two picks, I wish I'd flip flop the order here because this is where I see I probably could have, not thinking that everyone was going to be filling their teams out. I think what you got in round 9, Jackson Dart, that's what I should have done with my ninth round pick because I look at my team with Brock Purdy at quarterback. And if I had Jackson Dart there instead, who is my QB5 in rankings, and then whoever as that bench player that I would have taken in round 10, I'd have liked it a lot better. So, had I made that one little change, Jackson Dart in round 9 and then whoever in round 10, I would have said that my team is the favorite on this board, but I think I made a fatal mistake kicking quarterback all the way to 10th round.
Yeah, I want to just say if you would have gotten Malik Neighbors instead of Nico
Yeah.
Collins, I would have just and then Brock Bowers right after that, I would have closed my laptop and just gone
Yeah.
to bed.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would have that would have been like an unbelievable start. I like your team, and I'm going to push back on Brian Robinson, and it's a player that I'm not like super high on, but we've seen how valuable Tyler Algier was. Bijan's got to come off the field a little bit. I
Yeah.
don't think in the 8th round that's terrible, so I'll push back there. And
And I think what you're
on
hoping for with Brian Robinson Jr. is like you're desperate. It's bye weeks. You
yeah,
don't have anybody to start. You put Brian Robinson in, and it's like, cool. He had 13 yards and a touchdown. Like that is better than anything I was getting off the waiver wire.
I mean, it is. And the Jackson Dart, and I'll get to it, but my words were when he made it back to me, like, I cannot believe he made it back to me because I thought for sure when I went Monungai, oh, Dave's going to take Jackson Dart there, or he's not even going to make
Yeah.
it back to me. Maybe I'll get Trevor Lawrence, who I love, but no. So I'll break down my team
And
real
that
quick.
was just
Okay,
and real quickly, just to explain
yeah,
it,
go.
like truthfully, I was making dinner during these last couple of picks and just wasn't really thinking through it fully because, like, in my mind, when I see that there are 4 quarterbacks on the board, I think that, because all of those guys, I look at them pretty close. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Jackson Dart, Caleb Williams, and even Dak Prescott. So 5 quarterbacks on the board that I have pretty tight in rankings. I say, I'm happy to take whichever of these falls, but with there not being extra rounds, nobody fell because everybody
Yeah.
wanted to fill out. And that's why I was kind of stuck with Purdy.
Well, Dave, I just want to apologize right now because I lied on the show earlier when you asked me who had my favorite draft.
So
I had
beat
my
you?
favorite draft. And
There you go,
honestly,
there you go.
if you ever draft in a fantasy draft and you don't walk away from at least half of them saying like, "Man, my team is my favorite," because you're taking your guys. You've been
Right.
mocking these picks. You know who you like, but I mean, these are my people, so I like them. Monter St. Brown at the 110, fantastic. He's my wide receiver 4. I'm super happy to get him as the wide receiver 5. So a little bit of value there. But what I didn't expect to happen was Kenneth Walker go with the 112 because I was hoping that, maybe, they'll take a wide receiver, James Cook, Martin Hampton, or Devon A. Chan, or Chase Brown will make it back to me. So I started my draft, Amon St. Brown, Chase Brown, through the moon. I was excited. Then I went Tedero McMillan. And then I was kind of watching what Mike and Jeff were doing. And once I saw that they went 3 running backs both, I knew, okay, well, so I'm going to be taking pass catchers here because
Mhm.
running backs are going to be available to me later in the draft. And that's exactly what happened. In the 4th round, I had a decision to make. It was Devontae Adams or Colson Loveland. And had I not gotten Tyler Warren, which is my favorite pick that I made in the draft at the 510, I probably would not like my team as much. But Tyler Warren came to me in the 5th round. Um, I've kind of mocked it in my head, like, okay, well, put Loveland there. What wide receiver would I have gotten? And I like the Adams Warren combo
Yeah.
the most. So I'm really happy there. And then because my 2 teammates that are my draft mates that were going after me both had 3 running backs, I knew that I didn't need to take a running back with that 5th round. So Cam Scatterbo fell to me in the 6th. I was happy there. I like the look of my team so far, so I was pretty comfortable. So I took safety and Jacoby Myers. And then Kyle Monungai, who I like a lot in Chicago. I think he could take a step up this season as my RB3. Very excited there. And then, yeah, it was between Monungai and Jackson Dart. And then I literally said in the chat to everybody, I can't believe he fell to me. The
Yeah.
one and only pick I was sniped on in the draft. Zach Charbonnet, Mike Kashuba. Good job, buddy. He's sniped me on the very last pick. And I took Jonah Coleman. And like, listen, if he ends up on the Minnesota Vikings, that looks like a good pick. But I mean, he could end up in a committee, and that could just be not a wasted 10th round pick, but a pick that kind of maybe looks like the Caleb Johnson pre-draft picks from last year. Like, yeah, we like the talent, but he ends up in not a great situation. Overall, though, I really like my team. I probably would have waited on quarterback a little longer, but I don't even know. Like Jackson Dart in the 9th round, like I said, give it that to me in August, and I'll take it 10 times out of 10.
And you talk about Zach Charbonnet. I think, that is such a good pick. And I would have loved to take him. I thought about him in the ninth round as well, because I think when you do these anchor, hero RB, whatever you want to call it. Like I got Jahmyr Gibbs, but I don't really have a viable RB2. If you can get a guy like Zach Charbonnet and just plug him into your IR spot, I mean, that could end up being the move right there, because then you're
Yep.
just streaming RB2, kind of figuring it out throughout the majority of the season. And then in the second half of the season, getting to plug in RB1 into your RB2 spot. Going to be a guy that I will be drafting on a lot of teams and just didn't work out in this mock draft. But Joey, we did it. Did a mock
Did it.
draft, talk
Mhm.
through it, talk through round by round, overall takeaways, favorite team, least favorite team, and then diving in on our teams. Any final takeaways on this episode before we log off here?
I really want to see where Jawan Jennings goes. It's been
Mm,
too long. We haven't seen it
yeah,
happen. Drew Davenport got him in the 10th round. That could be somebody that really moves up the draft boards. Kenyon Sadiq, going that late in the 10th round, if he ends up in a good landing spot, we're going to see that pick move up. I think all the teams look really good. I mean, this is a tough draft room. There's a lot of sharp drafters, so I knew nothing was going to come easy. I'll just say, eh, being in an industry draft, it's very rare that it feels like a home league. But having Kashuba and Bell drafting after me, I kind of knew what was going to happen there. And not to say that I read their picks or anything, but I knew how to draft against them to make a team that I'd be happy with. I think their teams look fantastic. But yeah.
and I really like picking at the edges for that reason. When you're picking in the middle of the draft board, it does feel like you're kind of just like a victim to runs, and you're just like picking whatever you can and you're kind of scrambling. Or when you're picking at the edges, you can kind of get an idea of who is going
Mhm.
to be picking what, and you can kind of dictate your next couple of picks around that. If you're picking at the absolute edges, 1 or 12, then you can kind of dictate runs, and you can draft a couple of running backs and get other people scrambling. So just from like a pure strategy standpoint, I like picking at the edges much more than I like picking in the middle. But Joey, we cracked the seal on mock drafts. We're gonna be doing
Yeah.
a lot more mock drafts this year. We're gonna be doing best ball drafts, high
Mhm.
stakes drafts. We're gonna be doing
Woo.
live streams, pre-recorded shows. There's a lot coming your way. So if you haven't subscribed already, be sure to do that on YouTube. If you haven't followed along or subscribed to the podcast, be sure to do that as well. We'll be bringing you nonstop mock drafts, live streams, all that fun stuff between now and NFL kickoff. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you soon.